Recording in progress.
All right, we'll go ahead and begin the Community Advisory Committee. This is the time and place in the city of Grand Forks for the Community Advisory Committee. We will begin with a quick welcome and introductions of the Community Advisory Committee members who are here and joining us online, as well as the Root Policy Research Team. So for those of you in person, maybe Catherine, we can start with you. I guess introduce yourself.
My name is Catherine Kester. I'm the Community Relations Manager at Xcel Energy and on the CAC.
Hi, my name is Tori Johnson, and I am retired from the Grand Forks Public School District, and I represent that. So, thank you.
All right, and I think we have Brandon Bombach joining us as well remotely. He is the business manager at the Grand Forks Public Schools. I know he's joining remotely because he has kids with him in the car. So if he's available, he can hop in. If not, we understand. And then we also have Sean Havis with Valley Senior Living, who's joined us remotely. There you are, Sean. And then Frankie, I'll toss it over to you and Lucy for introductions as well.
Great. Thank you, Colin. Good evening, everyone. My name is Frankie Lewington. I'm an associate with Root Policy Research. We are a housing research and community planning firm based in Denver, Colorado, and we are assisting the city of Grand Forks with their consolidated plan and analysis of impediments to fair housing choice update. I will hand it over to Lucy to introduce herself.
Hello, everyone. My name is Lucy McGehee. I work for Root Policy Research alongside my colleague Frankie, and I've been helping with the data analysis and some of the community engagement work that we've done for Grand Forks Consolidated Plan so far.
All right, thank you. Today's order of events is we are going to hold a public hearing regarding the city's development of our 5-year strategic plan, which is known as the Consolidated Plan, as well as the 2025 Annual Action Plan and the analysis of impediments to fair housing choice. For that public hearing, for those who have comments and wish to speak and provide comment during that public hearing, there are citizen comment forms at the back of the room. If you're joining as a citizen remotely and wish to speak, we just ask that you raise your hand or send a message in the chat on Zoom, and we will go ahead and provide you time. This is the same format that is for citizen comments for city council meetings, which is up to 5 minutes for each person speaking. After the public hearing, the Root Policy Research Team will lead a community meeting and discussion for people to also provide feedback at that time on different things affecting our community, such as affordable housing and childcare. But I will, before we open the public hearing, I'll let Frankie with the Root Policy Team kind of describe what we're having this public hearing for and what we're hoping to hear from or hear about.
Great. Thanks, Colin. So as a requirement of the consolidated planning process, HUD requires 2 public hearings, one one during the development of the plan, and then the other during the public comment period. So, this public hearing is meant to just get initial feedback from the community on affordable housing needs, community development needs, which are community centers or parks or senior centers. So feedback on that, or if there's other public services that are needed or community services that are needed, in your opinion, in Grand Forks. Colin mentioned childcare as an example. So that is the type of feedback that we're looking to get. And then after this public hearing's closed, as Colin mentioned, we'll be walking through a PowerPoint, just giving a little bit more background on the consolidated plan, the action plan, as well as the AI, and then some more discussion around needs. So with that, I will hand it back over to you, Colin, to open the public hearing.
Perfect. One other item to clarify too is that the Community Advisory Committee will take no formal action today. There's no recommendations that'll be made going forward to council or anything like that. The committee is here to hear from the residents and citizens of Grand Forks on these needs. With that, for those who wish to speak, we'll have you go to the far podium there. And Jennifer Tarlin, if you wish to speak, please feel free to join us.
Thank you. I'm not quite sure who I'm addressing, but I'll try to be aware of everyone. And forgive me, I do not have planned notes. I've been engaged in a project and minimally aware of this meeting until very recently. So but there are some points I would like to make. The first is thank you so much for planning this and actually inviting the public to comment on services and especially housing in Grand Forks. I live at in the north end, the older section of Grand Forks, and I've been living in this community for about 30 years. And overall, I've been tremendously impressed with the quality of life Grand Forks provides. One reason why I've stayed so long. But I have noticed over the 30 years I've been here a change in the way the community is structured, and it's one that I've become personally familiar with. When I moved, I was living out of the country for a few years. When I returned, I bought a small house in the north part of Grand Forks, quite adjacent to the university campus. And I became aware, the first thing I became aware of is what had at one point when I moved here been very much a residential community of small, modest homes. Some university faculty, just some people in the community, pleasant place to live, has, since I've been living there over the last 7 years, changed, altered dramatically, as more and more of single-family homes have been turned into commercial property by developers. And more often than not, they are rented to groups that are larger than are that are supposed to be there. Often, because of the control on the housing, what happens is that both the rentals and the property values tend to be what looks to me like sort of artificially inflated because they are now commercial, they're not residential, which means it's more difficult for students to find livable places to live. More often than not, the commercial developers maintain their property at a level that is minimally within the regulations imposed by the city, but overall means that it's run down. While there used to be a balance about 50-50 on my street of owned and rented housing, it's now, I think I'm one of 2 owner-occupied houses on the street now. What it has meant has been a decline in the neighborhood. And I mean, while my personal circumstance drew my attention to housing issues, which I hadn't given a great deal of thought to before, I started looking around and paying more attention. The other thing I've noticed is that Grand Forks, which used to be largely a heterogeneous community 30 years ago, with modest and affluent housing fairly adjacent, now has become somewhat ghettoized into areas that are largely very low income, tend to be higher crime. That's certainly the case in the part of North Grand Forks I live, tend to be housing that is not very well maintained. And it seems to me, as I've also looked around at other communities, that other communities have approached this problem these issues like this through a strategic planning process that looks ahead and that comes up both with zoning and with regulations and structures to try to keep housing more balanced and more accessible, and also in some cases incentives to make it more possible for lower income people to afford housing, and so that I would love to see us return to that more heterogeneous kinds of communities. And also to see more and more property ownership shifting out of the hands of individual owners, both affluent and not affluent, and more into the hands of commercial developers who are primarily interested in how much rental they're going to extract and less in the quality of life in the neighborhood. So I think that's my major. And I would add in passing is that since starting this quest, I've also become a member of the board of the Housing Authority, which has certainly made me aware of many more issues that have to do with poverty, housing, and homelessness, and the kinds of services people need. And I would like to see a greater investment made by the city, since right now a significant amount of what supports those services is federal pass-through funds. I would like to see the city itself make that kind of investment. And I would also particularly like to see greater investment in educational opportunities, because I think that is, in the long run, what probably changes things the most. But just my opinion. So thank you for being here. Thank you for making this study. I'd make one other point. I would like to see a city planning process in which the people who stand to profit the most from greater commercialization of property are not permitted to be on the same committees and groups that make decisions about regulations and housing, because that appears to me to be a pretty overt conflict of interest. So that's another point. What I would like to hear from our consultants, particularly if they have it, are examples of other. I know that many of the issues that we face do not simply affect Grand Forks. They have become issues, particularly as investment in property has become an increasingly lucrative method of investment. That has been something that's going on throughout the country, and I wonder if they can provide us with some examples of the way other communities have come up with planning policy at the city level to provide more balanced and accessible housing to members of their community. That's all.
All right. Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to make a comment during the public hearing portion of this meeting? We had one comment submitted that will be entered into the record of this meeting that was provided ahead of time, that was forwarded to the members of the Community Advisory Committee and the consultants, and was posted online as well. With that, we'll go ahead and close the official public hearing, and we will move on to the discussion led by Root Policy Research. And Frankie, I think you will have to, or Frankie or Lucy will have to share your screen, and we should be able to see it here in council chambers.
Great. Thanks, Lucy. And can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. Well, thank you all again for being here this evening. We are here again for the 2025-29 Consolidated Plan, Annual Action Plan, and Analysis of Impediments Update Public Hearing. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned earlier during introductions, we are a housing research and community planning firm. We have worked on over 300 projects all across the country, mainly on consolidated plans and fair housing plans, which we are working on now for the city of Grand Forks. We also work on language access plans, child care needs assessments, and other economic mobility studies. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to provide a brief overview of the consolidated plan as well as the AI. We've already taken care of the public hearing, so we won't need to do that. And then Lucy will also share some of the preliminary engagement findings that we heard during our time in Grand Forks earlier this month. We were lucky enough to speak with several residents as well as stakeholders in Grand Forks. So what is a consolidated plan? So it is a planning document that is required by the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. It uses a combination of data, including data from the census, specific data that is developed by HUD for this specific plan, and then other local data sources, as well as community engagement. So as I mentioned, we've already begun speaking with stakeholders. We held a series of resident focus groups. We have a survey out right now that we will share information on later in this PowerPoint to get feedback from the greater community. So we're looking at what are the greatest housing needs in the city? What are other community development concerns, as I mentioned, public facilities and public services? And then if there are existing gaps in supportive services that are serving low and moderate income populations. So as the city of Grand Forks is considered an entitlement jurisdiction, so to receive the federal funding from HUD, they need to produce this document every 5 years. Next slide, please. So what can the funding be used for? So this specific source of funding that the city receives is called the Community Development Block Grant, or CDBG. Here are a few of the activities that CDBG funds can be put towards. So acquisition of real property, relocation and demolition, rehab of both residential and non-residential structures, improvements to public facilities, energy conservation and renewable energy resources activities, public services, as well as economic development and job creation or retention. So as a recipient of federal funding, the city of Grand Forks is required to affirmatively further fair housing. This is a requirement coming out of the Fair Housing Act. So affirmatively furthering fair housing, or AFFH, looks at meaningful actions to combat discrimination that overcome patterns of segregation, and look at activities and other strategies to make communities more inclusive, as well as increase access to opportunity for populations that are fall into protected classes under the Fair Housing Act. So this analysis will look at fair housing issues in the city of Grand Forks, what are contributing factors to those issues, and then we'll work with city staff based on the data that we analyze, the community engagement findings that we receive, and put together goals and strategies to address those fair housing issues. So as I mentioned, we currently have a survey out in the field. There is the URL. There's also a QR code there for you to scan to take the survey. We also have the URL for the website. That is pretty long, so if you just type in Grand Forks Consolidated Plan in Google, you will be led to that page. So the survey is open right now, and we'll just, maybe Lucy, just hold on 10 or 15 seconds, just so that folks have a chance to either write down the URL or get the QR code with their phone.
Frankie, one note too, we do have printouts here in City Hall in council chambers. If you wish to take one with you, you can. That has information on the survey. We also have a shortcut URL, which is grandforksgov.com/survey. So if you want a quicker way to get to the website URL, folks can go there too.
Great. Thank you, Colin. All right, Lucy, we can go to the next page. So I'm going to hand it over to Lucy to just describe some of the engagement findings that we heard a couple weeks ago.
Hi, everyone. Me and Frankie traveled to Grand Forks in early June, and we facilitated 4 focus groups with residents in Grand Forks. The first one was with CVIC, which is a service provider for survivors of domestic violence. The second one we did was with voucher users with Grand Forks Housing Authority. The third was at Northlands Rescue Mission with people who were experiencing homelessness and staying at the rescue mission. And the fourth one we did was at Development Homes, which is a service provider for people with disabilities. So we asked people in these focus groups barriers they have experienced when looking for housing in Grand Forks, improvements to their current housing situation, and then also things that they would prioritize using city funding to improve their lives in the city. So there are some recurring themes that kept coming up. The first one was that credit and criminal history are consistently barriers when entering housing. The housing options for voucher users, people with poor credit, and criminal records was often viewed as unsafe and not well maintained by residents with these backgrounds. Safety was consistently a top concern for residents, especially, as I mentioned, in those areas where vouchers were predominantly accepted. Units often lacked deadbolts. Very simple safety measures were non-existent. Residents noted that there's a lack of family-friendly emergency shelter options within Grand Forks. And they also identified a lack of mental health care, a lack of dental care, and substance abuse recovery resources within the city. And then finally, residents often mentioned that transportation could be vastly improved, especially to accommodate people with disabilities, that they lacked a point-to-point service, and that transportation could better accommodate working families by expanding their hours, and that residents had trouble accessing community resources such as the DMV and food pantries with existing transportation routes. And then we also hosted a stakeholder consultation meeting while we were there, and this was in hybrid format. So some people were online and some people came in person to share their perspectives as service providers. They also echoed the need for enhanced transportation, more options for families seeking shelter, and they expressed concerns for safety, especially near the affordable housing complexes. They also highlighted the need for affordable homeownership options to preserve housing stability, and that some low-income homeowners were being priced out of their current housing due to property taxes. Caseworkers often mentioned that, or the staff overseeing caseworkers mentioned that caseworkers were overburdened, especially in homeless shelters and other service agencies, as they had to take on a lot more people that are struggling with physical health, mental health, and substance abuse issues when they might not necessarily be trained for those things. Stakeholders would like to see more collaborative case management between existing service providers in the city, and they felt like there just wasn't enough funding to address the broad issues that were occurring in Grand Forks. So I'll turn that back to Frankie now to do the Menti.
Great. Thank you, Lucy. So this next part of the presentation is to get feedback from the people both online and in person. So we're just going to ask a series of questions through this platform called Mentimeter. And you'll see once you answer the questions, your answers will populate. So we'll give folks just maybe 30 to 45 seconds to either go to www.menti.com and enter the code on the screen, or scan the QR code to navigate to the survey on your phone. Looks like we have two folks. We'll give people a few more moments to navigate to Mentimeter. And I should just say this again is just one opportunity to provide input. The survey will be is still open, so if people are having trouble getting to this platform or would rather not do it, that's completely fine. The survey is available and open. Additionally, Lucy and I have our emails at the very end of this presentation, and you can email us with your thoughts or perspectives, as well as city staff, which they will forward to us. So again, not the only opportunity to participate. Great. Well, Lucy, maybe we can get started. Great. So this first question is, what are the greatest housing needs in Grand Forks? And there are a series of answers there. And feel free to just select your top 3 or 4 greatest housing needs in Grand Forks. Great. It looks like the first responses came through. So affordable home ownership opportunities. Second is affordable rental housing, and third is emergency shelters. And we've got some other rankings. Housing hazard mitigation assistance, housing repair and rehab for low to moderate income homeowners, rounded out the top 5. Great. And here's just an open-ended response. So, we only listed 9 housing needs. So if there are other housing needs that that participants thought of that you want to make sure we capture, feel free to write them down here. So we'll give you 30 to 45 seconds to add any additional thoughts. All right, let's go ahead to the next one, Lucy. All right, next question is, what are the greatest community development needs in Grand Forks? Again, these were mainly based on improvements to existing community facilities or the need for more or new community centers or other facilities. So first response is sidewalks, streetlights, and or other similar neighborhood improvements, ADA improvements to public building and or community amenities, and then help for nonprofits. And then 4th and 5th are more and or improved childcare facilities in my neighborhood or community, and more and or improved public parks in my neighborhood. Good, folks. Great. And then again, any other community development needs that weren't listed on the previous screen, please feel free to describe those here. All right, Lucy, do you want to jump to the next slide? So this next question, what are the greatest public service needs in Grand Forks? And again, feel free to rank your top 3 or 4 public service needs you think are most needed in the city. Great. So we had someone rank all of them. So first, supportive services for vulnerable populations. Oh, another one came through. We are. So affordable childcare and mental health services are tied. Services to address food insecurity, supportive services for vulnerable populations, and then health and dental care services. Round out the top 5. And it looks like we have a few more participants. So maybe I'll just hold on 15 to 20 seconds here, Lucy, and see if anyone else has feedback. Great, another one came through. So affordable childcare, mental health services, supportive services for vulnerable populations, services to address food insecurity, and then health and dental care services. Great. And again, another opportunity to list any public service needs that, again, weren't listed on the previous screen. All right, Lucy, we can move to the next slide. And then another open-ended response, just where in the city are these needs most prominent? Again, you can be general or based on the specific needs on the previous 3 screens, you can also specify there. North End is one response. In older communities, there's less investment into parks, sidewalks, etc. The North End area is underserved in this area. Near downtown, UND's campus, and then the South End near Walmart and Target. And then the North End again. I think we had one more participant, so we'll give them just a few more seconds. North End again. Great. All right. And this is just our last slide. Any final thoughts or ideas or needs that were not articulated in the previous slides? Please feel free to write them down here, as well as anything else that you want to make sure we capture in the development of both of these plans.
Frankie, would you be all right if we had some members of the audience who didn't participate in the Mentimeter share some thoughts, if they have any, at the end of this?
Absolutely.
All right, thank you.
So one comment, rent-to-own support, rehab of older home support, better bus systems, and more food equity. Thank you. We have a thumbs up for that. Yes, rent-to-own support. Second to the rent-to-own. Great. Great. Well, Colin, I will hand it then over to you if there's anybody in the audience who wants to share more feedback on any of the needs that we just discussed.
Okay, if there is anyone who'd wish to share their thoughts on what we've covered, you'd be more than welcome to do so.
Is public safety a part of this? Is public safety considered a part of this planning? My question is, this city needs better speed control, traffic police control.
Okay, so Frankie,
I don't know where that fits, and if it fits at all.
Frankie, the comment was, or the question was, is public safety considered a part of this consolidated plan, specifically concerns with speeding, police, and items of that nature?
So more specific to infrastructure. So these one of the slides mentioned street and sidewalk improvements. So if the city decided to institute traffic calming measures, yes, these funds would be eligible to be put towards that use. But public safety in terms of police, I don't believe so. I don't believe that is an eligible activity.
Colin,
Yes?
as a cat, I would just like to probably echo or support what Ms. Carlin said earlier in terms of heterogeneity in the community. I was born and raised here, so I've lived here for a long, long time. And one of the things I've really appreciated about Grand Forks is the equality afforded people who live all over the community. And particularly as a public school former employee, I really appreciated that it didn't matter where you went to school in terms of what kind of services you needed or what kind of classes you could take, especially in the elementary, but certainly in the middle and high schools as well. I mean, the school district worked really hard at making sure that all kids had access to what they needed, regardless of where they lived. And if that's becoming less and less so, then that's not a good thing. You know, it's not, in my opinion as well, it's not a good thing for the community at large, but it's certainly not a good thing, I don't think, for schools and for the whole idea of inclusivity, heterogeneity, and the richness that that brings to a community. So just from the school perspective, like I said, as a teacher and then as an administrator, I can remember people calling me and saying from other cities, moving to Grand Forks, where should we move? What part of town should we move in? And I'd say, what do you, why? You know, and they'd say, well, we want this for our child. And I would say, it's available in any of the buildings. And many people would be shocked by that. So that would be a pitch that I would have to continue that pursuit of, along the lines that you brought up, Ms. Carlin, and that's very important to me too. And I think it's important to the schools. So.
And Frankie, we just had one other comment that noted the difference in the facilities in the different parts of town also reflect the statements made by Tori.
And funding is always an issue in schools, you know, and again, I think, I don't know, I'm retired, so I am not part of the school district technically anymore, but I do think that that is hard. But in the past, they worked really hard to make sure all of the schools were kept up, and you know, they look different because, you know, some schools are larger, some schools are smaller. I still want to believe that there's still efforts to do that, but neighborhoods matter, you know, so.
Hi, Colin, Brandon Bombach here. Do you mind if I make a quick comment?
Yes, Brandon, go ahead.
I was just going to comment on the last comment there. Just being in the school district now, I can tell you that when investments are made across buildings or even within staffing and operational resources, equity is always kept in mind. Always difficult to achieve, but always kept in mind. So the promise of quality education, no matter where you're at in the city, is absolutely the goal.
Thank you. Jennifer, would you want to share your, I can bring you a microphone if that's easier.
I mean, they're so each other. No, my point was simply that the one concept that I hadn't seen addressed so far was the idea of neighborhoods and things that strengthen neighborhoods. Because when you have a sense of, you know, communication and inclusion in a neighborhood, it means that people who may need particular kinds of help can sometimes have that help addressed by neighbors as well. And that's part of the fabric of the community that used to characterize Grand Forks, and I think that we're losing a bit.
Thank you. All right, I don't think we have any other comments here, Frankie.
Great. Thanks, Colin. And I just wanted also to address Ms. Carlin's comment about examples of other jurisdictions of how they have handled commercial entities buying up residential properties. I don't have any examples off the top of my head, but I can work with my team to see if we can find some, and then I can circle back with Colin and city staff and share those. And also we can touch on that in the plan as well.
We have one more comment here.
And it actually comes out of my experience, very recent experience on the board of the Housing Authority, because I've been so impressed with the range of services and the quality of the services that have been offered through the Housing Authority, and just the number of different communities that exist. But again, going back to the neighborhoods issue, one thing that I question is what we seem to be doing is segregating lower income populations into particular communities, as opposed to that more integrated sense of the community when people of varying resources lived happily together and helped each other. There seems to be a tendency to separate people with special needs from the rest of the population, and somehow instinctively that doesn't strike me as perhaps the only way you want to address poverty and issues that go with it.
All right. Anything else to wrap up, Frankie?
That is it. I will just plug the survey again. As Colin mentioned, it looks like there's some handouts there with the survey information. So if you haven't already taken that, please do so, and also share it with your networks.
Sounds good.
And thank you again for having us this evening.
All right. Thank you so much. And thanks for those of you who attended. We appreciate your input and your feedback, your public comments. And as we work with the consultants on developing this plan and to serve our community for the next 5 years. So, and as Frankie said, if you have further comments to share outside of this, please feel free to reach out to us. We will be sure to forward that on to Frankie, and then if they have anything to share as well, we'll be sure to keep folks in touch. So with that, we'll adjourn the Community Advisory Committee. So thank you.
Thank you.